Hey everyone, Jordan here. Today we're going to be looking at the Cooler Master Masterbox 600, which is my first rear connecting and supporting case that I've looked at on the channel. I'm going to be trying it with the MSI Project Zero board that we looked at previously. I'll also be doing a build with this in the future as well. I'll tell you more about that as we get throughout the video. But for now, let's get this case unboxed and have a look. Oh, that was the worst one ever. Oh, jeez. I was expecting that because this is just normal polystyrene on this case. There's no like the closed cell foam or anything, so yeah, very likely for shockage with that kind of stuff. Manual included is just paper and loose. Sometimes you get a manual that's in plastic, which I seem is really pointless, just a waste of plastic as well. So I think that's good to see that just on its own. So there we have the Masterbox 600, available in black and white, currently £104 or $99. First impressions, it does feel not quite so premium as some cases I've looked at for this price point, but we'll talk more about that in the conclusion. So let's have a look around this thing and see what it offers. So let's start at the top. We have got some nice I/O options. Got two USB 3 ports. These are USB Type A 3.2 Gen 1. We've also got a Type C, which is USB 3.2 Gen 2x2. Headphone microphone combi jack, reset button, little hard drive activity light or SSD activity light. Not many people will be using hard drives. And then we've also got a illuminated power button. Removing this dust filter, we have got support in the top for a 360mm rad. You can do two 140mm. So a 280 if you'd rather. Going around to the front, a little bit of a grey and black colour theme going on. This front is also removable. On the back there isn't any filtration though, so just something to bear in mind. You will need to clean it a little bit more regularly. Also worth mentioning that I've been using the Masterbox 520 since I did the build on the channel. I didn't find that I needed any parts for other videos, so I kept it as it is. And I've been using it as a daily editing and working PC. That's a very similar front, that's why I thought I'd mention it. That doesn't have a dust filter either, but is very easy to clean and does trap the dust very well, even considering it's not got any additional filters. So in front of this case we have got three pre-installed 140mm, these are sickle fans, RGB. There is also a hub built in, and we have got a pre-installed 120 as well. Hopefully they'll match in illumination because they're not the same model. Something that I do like to see matching ideally, but hopefully we will not have a problem with it. I have just noticed though this little peg that's holding in the fans on the front. There's two, and I also don't think I'll be able to get that back in now. Underneath, not too much to talk about. We have got some foam pads, obviously to get some airflow to your power supply. There's also a removable filter on there. That seems very basic and quite cheap actually, that one, but you can remove that if you need to clean it. On the back we've got the pre-installed 120mm RGB fan that I mentioned, obviously the cutout for our rear I/O. Expansion brackets, these are the ones that you have to bend out rather than the ones that comes with screws that you can replace. I actually saw this case featured on a Geekwatt video from James and he summed it up really well.
Actually that big of a problem, I just think it looks
Wholeheartedly agree with his thoughts. I think it just looks really naff. If you're going to sell this case on, for example, maybe you're a streamer and you use a capture card in one of these slots or a sound card, you're going to punch that hole out and then the next person that goes to use it will just have a hole visible in the case all the time. So unless you obviously buy a set of expansion covers, but at this price point they should come included. Power supply bracket at the bottom will support a 170mm power supply or a 220mm if you take out the hard drive cage that's inside. We'll cover that when we get to the rear of the case. I'm not sure if you can really tell on camera, but this case does look like it's taken a bit of a knock and it's a little bit pressed in here, kind of curves in a little bit, but that's also part, again, it does feel a little bit cheaper. So let's get into the case. We have got a little thumb screw to take off the glass, not a captive one though, and then we should be able to pop this open. Comes out at an angle and slides away. That does feel like 4mm glass as well, so pretty premium on that regard. So looking into the case, of course, we've got the support for our reverse connect motherboards. You can do the M80X versions as well, not just the 80X, so if you want to use the smaller one for some reason you can do. Personally I'd recommend an 80X to fill it out. Of course you can use a standard layout if you'd rather. It will support up to E80X. There's also some rubber grommets for those cables that will come through if you're using a standard motherboard. Otherwise they're just going to be redundant, as obviously all the connectors are on the back of the motherboards if you're using a reverse one. On the top we've got some basic cutouts for the cables to come through, maybe an EPS 12 pin if you're using a standard board. There is a long cutout at the top, but it doesn't seem to go anywhere, and there's no cutouts in it either, so I'm not really sure why that's there. There is a little gap for the fan cable to go through, which I suppose is quite handy. By the power supply shroud we have got a big gap. If you want to put a thicker area, maybe like an Arctic Freezer 3 for example, that will fit in there nicely. You can support up to a 420mm in the front, as obviously we've got 140mm fans. So now I've got this case out and seen that the power supply shroud isn't removable. That's answered the questions of why they've got those little push pin things for the fans on the front. Not very easy to access unless you were to take the hard drive cage out, for example, and try and screw in from the back. Push pin things are clearly not very good, as I've already broken them and the case has been out the box for like 10 minutes. We've got some more cutouts at the bottom for your standard motherboard connectors. Then the rear 120 that I mentioned is RGB. A little bit of a different style from the ones on the front though, especially in the corners, but you're not really going to see these ones anyway, especially if they're covered by the front cover. In terms of maximum height for CPU towers and graphics cards, you've got a maximum of 170mm for an Air tower, then a maximum of 360mm for a graphics card, or 410 if you're not using a front radiator. So taking off the back panel to have a little bit of a look, we've got an RGB hub on the top left here. We have got one spare 5V addressable header there. There's no additional 4-pin headers for power though, so you have to use the motherboard ones or maybe use some splitters. As this is the first rear connect board that I looked at, it does look a little bit difficult to cable manage, but of course once you've got your board in, it's going to cover most of that anyway, so it's not going to be too bad. You have got loads of cable tie points for EPS connectors and things to route up, and your ones down the bottom for front panel. The accessory bag, we've got all the screws to mount. We've also got a standoff adapter if you need to add any additional ones in or remove some. We've got some rails for some 3.5-inch drives. You can do 2 in the little hard drive cage down the bottom here. You can also support 2.5-inch drives on the back of the motherboard there as well. Last but not least, the rear panel connectors. We've got the USB 3 header. I like that they do the purple to match Cooler Master, nice little touch. The 5V addressable 3-pin, USB Type C. We've got a front panel on one header, which is really nice. HD audio, 4-pin PWM for the hubs. And we've also got a SATA which will power that hub as well. So that was a look around the case. I'm going to put my test system in it so I can do some thermal testing. We'll set the fans to 1600 RPM or as close as I can get to it, as I keep it 1600 RPM for all the testing. Same for the cooler heatsink as well. I'll then put the MSI board in it so you can see what that looks like at the end. I will be doing a full build with that board and this case as well, so stay tuned and get subscribed and ding the bell so you don't miss that. But that will be where we'll talk about the rear connect aspects a little bit more, but I will show you it in the case just so you can see what it looks like. So let me do all my testing and I'll be back to you in a minute with my full thoughts. So on to the testing results and my thoughts with the Cooler Master Masterbox 600. I'm going to keep this briefer than usual as I'm going to be building with this case soon. I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. Now as you can see, I've got the MSI Z790 Project Zero motherboard in there. I've also used some Asgard piano finish DDR5s. It matches really well. If you're going to use this motherboard, then I'd probably say the white case would go a little bit better, especially as there aren't any affordable black ATX reverse connector boards on the market yet, which I think would pair with this case a lot better. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be building with this case and power supply. Cooler Master very kindly sent over the 360 Atmos AIO and also a power supply to use, so let me know what kind of spec you'd like to see. I was thinking maybe a 14700K and a 7900 GRE maybe. From what I can see, there's adequate room for the 24-pin, even though it does need to be bent and kind of squashed flat to accommodate the back panel. You can get the 90-degree adapters if you're not comfortable squashing down the connectors though. It's been very simple to build in. I would recommend that you put your EPS connectors in first if you're going to use an AIO, because it's not that spacious at the top. There's also only enough room for a standard AIO as well, not one of the thicker Arctic Freezer 3 for example. So if you're going to use one, then you will need to mount it into the front of the case instead. So let's talk about temperatures. I use the Ryzen 7 5800X3D as my testing system, whether or not to an NHU12A air tower, the fan set to 1600 RPM. All of the case fans are set the same as well, but for this case, no pun intended, the only ones I had to change were the front ones, as the rear fan only has a maximum speed of 1200 RPM. In my usual thermal test, I saw a high temperature of 86.7 degrees. Moving the ambient and then putting it into the chart, it does come out of one of the hotter cases that I've tested. That being said, the majority of those results are 1.5 to 2 degrees different, so it's not as bad as it first appears. The included fans are pretty loud, hence why I've got the front ones attached for this video. Even at a lower RPM they are pretty audible too. They're usually around £12 each, which isn't too bad for an RGB fan, but I think an option that would be quite good is offering this case without any fans at all. It would allow some flexibility for those who like the design but don't want the fans or RGB, plus it would also bring the price down. As you can guess, the one thing that I don't like about this case is the bend out covers. I'd certainly like to see this changed. The case does offer pretty good value, especially with the 4 fans, but these brackets, or for me at least, just bring down the overall appeal. Could be really nitpicky, especially as you can buy sets of covers and they're not too expensive, but I would say those bend out covers are for the lowest budget cases, not the ones that are stretching into 3 figures. Overall, I think this is a good option from Cooler Master. You've got the 4 included fans, nice top I/O, the RGB and fan hub is a nice little bonus, and of course you have the rear connect support for the motherboards, even if they're still somewhat expensive. So let me know what you think about the Masterbox 600 in the comments. I'll leave the links in the description if you want to pick one up. If there's anything else you'd like to know, then of course leave a comment and I'll get back to you. Thank you all for watching. Get subscribed and ding the bell so you don't miss the next video. Also the build that I'm going to be doing with this, and also the Project Zero motherboard. Thank you to Cooler Master for sending this out for me to look at, and I'll see you all in the next one.